why can't I swipe left,
Yeah.
on the design?
We need to talk after this because this was literally a problem that I was working on this morning. And I'm like sitting in my Google Sheet. There's got to be a better way than this. Well, boys, thanks for joining us this week. Let's just start with some intros. Who are you? What do you do?
That's it.
Let's start there.
Great. I'm James Cosman. Founded a company about 12 years ago called VeilSun. We build construction software for the construction industry, really custom niche stuff. We're doing a lot of replacing spreadsheets. Somebody has some process with Procore that they want to build out further, right, and get it out of a spreadsheet. So I started out early on as just a developer and kind of built it into a business, had my feet on the ground for a long time, and now I have to do all the unfun stuff like run that business. So, and we do a lot of our work on QuickBase. So yeah, that's what I do. Thanks for inviting us here.
Heck yeah, man. Like it's fun when you run a business. You're like, I like doing this thing, and then you get to this level, and then you no longer get to do the thing that was fun.
No, you're just dealing with people.
That's it.
Those
people,
at that time.
HR. Yeah,
I just want to code. Thanks.
Yep.
All right.
That's awesome. All right, Bob, you're up.
I'm Bob Salaj. I'm the Director of Customer Advisory for QuickBase, primarily for construction overall. Started my career off in manufacturing, actually, and really went down like a Lean Six Sigma process mapping exercise, Post-it notes, see what we got with that. And for the last decade got swooped up by an electrical contractor out of Pittsburgh. And we said, hey, why don't we go map out all our processes and kind of figure this out? And we talk about standards and cost codes and all these mega projects coming out. And so I introduced them to QuickBase because they pretty much didn't have much of a technology stack at the time. And so kind of figuring out what we can do. And one app led to another app, led to another app. It kind of like grows like that overall, like a vine. And next thing you know, we kind of like ran quite a lot of processes within that one application, or within multiple applications, but within that realm overall. Yeah. So I've done that, and then just for the last few months, been actually working for QuickBase directly for that. So now we're going out and talking to contractors to letting them know what can be done in this fashion. So exciting.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, so this idea of tailoring software solutions, like for a construction company, that seems to be kind of a new thing. Right, like it's becoming more and more common lately. Of like, oh, we need a solution. We need somebody that'll come in and build it custom for us. Because I mean, sometimes these one size fits all things they're not quite getting all of it done, right? And that's where you're focused, right?
Yep. And don't judge me too much on this, but I came out of business school originally and was into business process consulting in the construction industry. And one of the first things that like I really noticed is there's this world of like, you have these big installed base like softwares out there for construction, like Procore, Oracle solutions, all of that. But then there's all these like gaps in between those. And what everybody was doing was they were back then it was passing paper around, right? You know what I mean? And now it's like spreadsheets. So there's this whole area of gaps between these solutions that aren't being served. And meanwhile, like I could just see it with my business brain, money's just going out the door, like with every piece of paper that was passed. So it's really what excited me about the construction industry. I saw that and I saw this, there's an opportunity to do something with it. And it's like how I found QuickBase. I was like, well, now what do we do to fill those gaps? Yeah.
There's gaps and there's overlap.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got gaps, and then you've got overlap where there are features that function and do either similar or the same things, maybe in different ways. Yep. So
I mean, a lot of times you might buy like monolithic structures, they call it, right? So you got your big applications, your big software environments, and then somebody in some department says, hey, how do we create this one application, or what do we buy off the shelf that moves in here? And then the next thing you know, some other department bought something similar, and now you kind of have an overlap point for that.
When each might have an opinion on like why they wanted their thing, right? Because there's maybe a little slant that kind of helps them out, helps their cause out. but they both kind of overlap and do a thing.
Right.
So how do you make the call? And we were going to talk about how to, how to make those decisions and kind of the process, or maybe the invention of having somebody come in and help you architect that. Would that be a good way of putting that? Like somebody to help you architect your business from the standpoint of your processes and systems.
I really like to think of it as like another trade, like you would think of an HVAC or electrical trade or steel works or whatever. It's like, I think where the construction industry has really kind of is a little bit behind is not thinking about their technology and who's going to support and build that from a trade standpoint, right? Because we're all in construction from different ways. And it's a really low margin business, right? You have a safety incident, like you can be in the red on a project, or you can go over deadline because people just aren't communicating about the schedule, right? So I actually like to, when I'm talking to people that our company has worked with, is to really think of this as like, you should think of this and give it the respect that you would give a trade, right? Like a technologist of some sort that is helping you. And it could be a very specific on one project, but once you start to kind of get them like looking at multiple projects, you can have a really custom app. You were talking about overlap, right? Over here, that overlaps with a whole nother custom app that's specific to a project over here, right? But with tools like QuickBase, it makes it really easy to take those overlaps and really make them so they can connect to each other and even connect back up to like the monolithic systems like you were talking about. So
integrate it through.
Yeah, so that's like how I like to think of the world. Is this is just another trade. It's not really thought of that way often in the industry.
That's an area that I feel is relatively new. But what are some of the coolest things that you're being asked to build? Can we dig into some of that? Like, what are some of these cool apps that you're implementing for people? Maybe this will be a chance to kind of give some other people some ideas and like things that they can automate and make better in their process.
Oh man, it's like we could probably go on for hours.
We got a lot. I mean, when you think about a lot of the like use cases that are out there, I think as you look at the trends in the industry, one of the coolest things out there right now, I think, is like prefabrication. And when we look at that, I mean, when you tack on how that begins to be interwoven with like vendor management, purchase orders, things that you necessarily don't actually think about. And what you see is the application begin to impact a lot of different departments under one roof, and you begin to make this tailor-made application that begins to serve a variety of multiple purposes for it. So when we are spearheading kind of like prefabrication, or like how does planning and VDC begin to kind of funnel into that, I start seeing like a lot of excitement around that, because it's like implementing a lot of ancillary solutions like Bluebeam and drawings and Autodesk. And it's like, how do we mesh this together while communicating across the board, as opposed to picking up the phone call and emails, et cetera, that we're used to overall. So like you said, I think that's just one of many that we can kind of talk through.
Yeah.
I think I did the count before here, and there's probably 35-ish different use cases that we tend to do over, but like one that really excites me personally, because I saw it really early on working with a big construction company out of the Northeast, is that they had P6 over here, Oracle P6 to run their master schedule. And then they had Procore over here to manage like their people and their project directories and who's involved in the project. But what was happening is like out in the field, nobody knew where the schedule was at. Nobody knew anything. So it was just a superintendent like running up and down the floors of this big building all day asking trades like, what are you doing? Where are you at? Like that was his whole job, was making phone calls to record back to the scheduler. So one of the most exciting use cases that I'm personally interested in, I love these projects, is we've done a lot where there's like a lean planning, pull planning component to it, where we're bringing in like the master schedule from P6 into QuickBase, right? And then we're allowing like the project teams, when they're on the project, get with the superintendent and the trades and actually do lean pull planning and break down those milestones more. And then once it goes from there, it's like, it's then getting pushed into a mobile app where they're in the field updating day in and day out, like exactly where they're at if it's delayed, and then rolling that all back up through QuickBase back to P6. And I love that use case because it hits so many parts of the business of just getting people aligned, right, with what's going on a job site and giving people the data that they need to like make good decisions. Because you can't change what's going wrong on a job site if you can't see it, right? And I think that plays into the data too.
That's one of those elements that I've seen, that's a full job right now.
Yep.
Is somebody that's just literally their whole job is just to update P6.
Yeah.
That's their whole job.
hire
That's their
them
whole
in and go
job.
through.
Yeah.
That's their whole job, is that they will go through and they will update P6. I've talked with people recently that do that.
That's right.
And so like you think about
There's departments.
Yeah.
That's all they do.
it's ridiculous. And like they're paid a pretty penny. I mean, because they've got to go out and chase people and say, when's this done? When did this get done? Or, when do you project this? Like that is a whole stinking job that you've completely automated out. Like ideally, at least you've automated out a full department and maybe you just have one other person now that's going back and spot checking things to make sure things are okay. Ideally, you get to a place where you're not having to do that at all.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's such an interesting time in the construction industry.
It really is.
Like there's so many opportunities to automate these different tasks. Like I feel like it starts to get confusing at a certain point where you're like, oh my gosh, like there's so many opportunities that you're not sure which ones to focus on. But that's why I love conversations like this, is because it gives us ideas on things that are like, oh my gosh, yes, that's a pain point. Updating P6 all the time, or like even calling the scheduler and being like, hey, yeah, here's where we're at. Or the scheduler calling you constantly.
Yeah.
Like this is stuff I feel like has just happened more recently than anything, with a lot more AI push and things like that. So
I don't know what you guys are seeing, but I think what I'm starting to see is like a lot more of these mega projects. So the moment we kind of get like job award, job kickoff, and then we start to like mobilize the entire team there at Trailer City, and we begin to realize like, okay, we're going to use P6 to schedule, right? Well, with the labor shortage and everything else that's going on here, we have to be more efficient with our resources coming on board. And it's like, well, why is this person in this role? Is there a better way? And typically what I'm starting to see is like you have your GC, you got your primaries, you got your tertiary here, basically with the specialty trades that are coming in. And you have all these different layers of systems that you default to saying, okay, we have this monolithic, how are we going to do installation rates? We have this piece of software, great. Well, you're part of my subcontractor unit. How does it all begin to funnel together? We default and we fall back to Excel. And I think what we're beginning to see is, especially with these mega projects, is what is the team on site? How do you choose the software and technology that they're going to use to pull it all together? And it's almost like a training opportunity for like assistant PMs. It's kind of like this new skill set that, all right, we default to Excel. Okay, that's great, but you want a database because you're going to want to kind of bring it all together to do notifications and workflows and everything else. So I think we're starting to see some of that within these mega projects and a little bit of a shift in terms of that resource component overall.
So this is such a timely conversation. True story. Had an engineer friend call me on Friday and ask me very specifically about systems. Like, what would you put in place and how would you do it? Now, here's the scenario. So I'm going to throw a scenario out there. Maybe we can play with the scenario a little bit. So this is a person that's been in the general contracting realm and has started their own general contracting business. They're becoming a general contractor, and maybe got in 5 to 10 million right now, doing multifamily construction. Got an engineer friend that's working with them on like architect and design build. And so the question is kind of like, how should I set up? Like, what kind of things should I think about? So I'll throw that scenario on the table. What kind of things in y'all's business brains and like in the I'm going to set this thing up right. What kind of advisement would you give that crew to get it off the ground on the right foot?
Right out of the gate on a job site itself?
Yeah, I mean, you've got, we're working through all of these different like realms. I mean, anything from scheduling, we're talking about P6, but all the way down to, we've got to get communication all the way down from the field, all the way down from where the work's placed, all the way back up to the people that need to know to run the business. So what kind of things do we need to think about there?
I think of the world in terms of data, almost like the Matrix going in front of my eyes, right? But like, and I think in like all the data in construction and in other industries really originates from the field, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the last mile that construction has struggled to get to. They're like have monolithic systems. Now they're starting to adopt more technology that a superintendent can use, but it hasn't quite gotten to the field because of some of the practical problems like, oh, this guy just has a flip phone. You know what I mean? Like that still exists on the job site. So when I think roll around back to your question, like when I'm thinking about these solutions, I'm thinking about where that data originates, and QuickBase has been a very good solution for us in that sense because you can think not only about like the mobile side of things, but you can also kind of think of like how that rolls up to like a superintendent doing technology. And then even beyond like QuickBase, it's like QuickBase is good for filling those gaps, right? But you're going to need to have some, even at the size of like 10 million, something to just manage the financials, you know what I mean? And there's really good out of the box solutions of that, but you really need a gap filler when choosing a technology. Because people want to like pretend that like every construction business is the same, and software has almost been like built like that. Like, oh, like everybody does committals and everybody does daily logs. But when you get into the detail of it, every construction business runs very different. So you need kind of a custom gap filling layer in technology that isn't a spreadsheet because they're inefficient and you can't collaborate on them. So that would be my biggest advice, because that technology, people don't think about it day one when they're starting a construction company, but it can actually be your differentiator, right? Like we've worked with a lot of like really, really large GCs and a really, really set of small GCs too. And the ones that really are growing are the ones that take a technology first approach and don't just kind of put that to the side, right? So
James, I love that, because the last few, honestly, weeks, we've actually just been talking about ourselves, is in construction, there are value-added differentiators that make us unique overall. And I feel like we're beginning to choose the software that really kind of pushes us out to kind of just be like everyone else. It's just a commodity at the end of the day, right? Well, when the first things that we would do and when we would consult with contractors is list out kind of like, what are your values of what you have as a company and what do you offer your customers? So when you say about setting it up, I mean, obviously one of the old cliches things is let's have tools, material, and information at the point of installation, right? So let's begin looking at the systems, but take that a step further and let's understand your process. So you can go out and buy a tool tracking software that might do this much, but how do you actually communicate that out? So let's figure out the software and let's process map to kind of figure out where we need to fill in that blanks while keeping that value-added differentiator as the companies move forward with it. And that's what gets me excited about this overall.
People like, they try to, and this is every industry, try to change their business to fit their software, if you think about it. Like, oh, we'll change this process to make it work right in Procore. But every time that you do that, you're making compromises about what really makes you different as like a GC, right? Or even a trade partner, right? And it happens really, really subtly, or you end up in spreadsheet hell, right? Which we see a lot, so. Gave you a really general answer to a very specific question. But
I think a couple things there that I can kind of pull on too is like, that middle, like connective tissue, I feel like is so lacking. Like, because there are so many things high level that we can reach out for project management or, schedule, whatever it might be. Trades down there, but something that brings that together and can connect the dots is an area that I feel like a lot of companies are really lacking right now. And also that process mapping, which I feel like is so underutilized in so many businesses. Because there's so much insight that you can pull from just mapping out, like, okay, I get somebody approach me about a job, what happens? And then just mapping out everything that happens from start to finish or to the best of your ability. You can stay pretty high level with it. But you're talking about like having all of this data in one spot. What if we can take that data and feed it back to the client?
Right.
Because what's going to happen? The client's going to go, where are we? What's the status? The what's the status question is going to happen. It's just a matter of when.
Right.
And being able to push that back out to your client, answer that before it even becomes a question. I feel like not just in the construction industry, but for so many companies out there, mine included, this is a big question, is like, how can I just give clients status without even having to, type up the email and say, hey, by the way, because I'm going to forget 1 week. It's going to happen.
No doubt.
It's going to happen. How do I give them the loading bar?
Yeah.
And that's the type of stuff that we're talking about here, is you can kind of set yourself up for that, right? Like if you can have that connective tissue, you can push that data out to the people that are going to ask the question.
Absolutely. And I think when we look at like installation rates and like material and kind of labor on the job, of what we're tracking that, I talk about like these mega projects. Well, now I'm going to enter in a new variable called joint ventures. And now as we get these mega projects, we're trying to pull in these labor forces from these different areas. And trade contractor XYZ is using their specific timesheets and everything to get that schedule and get the status update. But then their sub, who they might have to pull out also, how do you track that? Well, now we're talking spreadsheets and Word documents and email just for like this other trade that's on the job. Well, how do we begin to like create this app really quickly? This isn't something that would take months or years to kind of go out and develop. It's like, okay, let's look at the spreadsheet, let's convert it. Now we have a system in place for this job, and we're up and running here within a day or two or a week, depending on what's going through. So this begins to like change the game in terms of how we're getting that information for the schedule and these status updates.
The JV is a big one. That's happening so often with these mega projects, but that's an area that I haven't even thought of too. Personally, is you've got a couple GCs that are going in together to get a project done, and everybody's got their own sort of system to get everything together. That's a really cool thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you got to differentiate between like material, tools, like, okay, who has point on that? And then at the end, you still got to kind of bring it all together. And then we're kind of left with, okay, well, our default is Excel overall. Let's get that on a dashboard. Let's see what else we can change.
That happens on the owner to GC side of things. Like as the owners adopt a tool because maybe they're serial builders. So think of the state of Georgia, and they're building, everything that's a part of the educational system in Georgia.
Yeah.
Right. They might have a monolithic system that they operate on, but then the GC is going to have to be able to plug into that. Subcontractors deal with this. Specialty contractors deal with this all of the time, because today I'm dealing with, construction company A, next B, C, D. I've got 5 different companies and relationships, and they all want me to relate to them through a different entry point or software entry point. How do I filter that back down and get it in one spot for myself, plugging into all of the larger softwares out there? And that's where we can dashboard some of this, right?
Yeah. And I think we're going to run into the game all the time of large projects and small projects, right? I think if there's a long enough tenure, we begin talking about integrations and pipelines and channels and like, how do we integrate maybe into their systems? But we also need to track our small projects as well, because at the end of the day, as owners of companies and presidents, we also want to see all of our value and metrics all in one place as well, not just to the owner or not just to one project in particular. We want to kind of see this overarching enterprise view. So mapping that out, again, going back to job kickoff and award, what's our systems? What do we need to integrate into? Let's map it out. Let's process it. Do we need an integration for that? Okay, great. How are we going to track our small projects as well and begin putting that all together under one roof for it? So
there's a big difference between tracking large and small projects.
Huge. Well, just a little
Just
bit.
the tactics of the that's something we run into a lot is we've got a process in mind. We've mapped it out. That process in mind, and it works really well for a large project that we're going to be on for months and has, RFI on RFI and process on process.
Right.
But what about the quick hitter that's like a day and a half? Do you just like not document it? So it's totally different tactics there.
It is, and that's where, like, this low code, we haven't mentioned it yet, but the low code aspect of the new software, because what's really changed is now you can build these apps really, really quick and really, really custom. So it's like you may have 2 completely different business processes that you're running on 2 different apps that are custom to that business process, a big project and a small project, right? but you can still interconnect them, bring the data together, right? So you can see everything across the board. So I really think that part of the story of technology and construction, as the future goes on, everybody talks about AI and it's cool and all that, but I think it's going to be interconnectivity of data, integration of data is really what it's going to be like. Can we get all these systems to talk and consolidate things in such a way where it makes sense, right? For whoever the stakeholder is, whether it's an owner, a GC, a subcontractor, right? Just a laborer on the job site, because part of the aging out, not to change topics, but, the labor shortage, I think part of the story of that labor shortage is that you have a generation that has come up with totally different expectations. Like they've come up with an expectation that I'm going to have technology and information in my hands. Like they grew up on the internet. And then they look at the construction industry and they're like, I'm going to have to fill out a piece of paper to get this done, or like talk to somebody and type it into a spreadsheet. And they're just kind of bailing on the industry, right? So part of this too is to bring more people in the industry. Like they need this technology at their fingertips.
Yeah, we look really backwoods to the younger generation when we bring them in and then hand them something that they're like, really, I do with that? Like, you want me to write this down?
Yeah.
Instead of just like, I can't do this on my phone.
Yeah.
Why can't I just do this on the phone? You have it.
Yeah.
Why don't you already have it? Like I filled this out back at the office.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why couldn't you tap into the database and just see that?
Why can't I swipe left, on the designs that So.
I had that happen a couple of weeks ago on a project. We went out and did a shoot and they were trying to find the safety forms. We walked around to 3 different trailers.
Yep.
And dude was just going, hey, where's that? Do you know? Okay. All right. Sounds good. And like 10 minutes. Just walking around.
Massive site, dude.
That's
not a small job.
Massive project.
Get your steps in on that one.
Yeah, we got our steps in. Yeah, but like, oh my gosh, I'm like, what the heck, guys? Really? Like, we got to find the clipboard.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, appreciate it. But I mean, that was the case for two projects back to back, big ones, big clipboards. And I'm like,
well, I think one of the things here is
scan the QR code.
Yeah, right.
Done.
When we think about like the foreman and everyone else, like we're talking buy-in. We're talking about like being inundated with so many systems. How do we get the field more bought into these solutions and everything? So when we start thinking about this, it's about time that software becomes part of our tool belt, right? So we get tools today, all right? Some of these, let's say, talk about like a material cart or tool cart, whatever you have out there. You're going to change it. You're going to augment it, right? You're going to begin tweaking it to make it work how you want as that tool that comes out. But software up to this point was kind of like, well, let's just buy it off the shelf and it is what it is. And you got to make it work and force it and do what you do. Low code, no code, QuickBase can help now tweak and make those adjustments so that when you bring in the foreman, you bring in the field, what would you like to see to make this better so that it works at the end of the day? I saw a totally different change in attitude. So we would pull them in, say, okay, and they would be like, well, we've asked for this field 3 times already and nobody can get it to us. We add it. So it's quickly to kind of help with that buy-in out in the field. So these safety forms, what do you need to change it? It doesn't work for X, Y, Z. Okay, well, let's change that up overall. And they start kind of beginning more bought into it overall in the process.
It's a user experience issue, right? Like, yeah, I'm used to doing it this one way and then we're going to completely change it overnight.
Yeah.
And try to shoehorn this other system in there. And yeah, that reluctance begins to occur, especially when it's like, yeah, we're shoehorning this other system in there, but we're missing these other things that were actually pretty mission critical for me to have on file. Was to have this info. And because I'm shoehorning into another software or something, I have no options, none, zero. And so this idea of low code, like flexibility, that's the main thing. And then from there, it's like, okay, we can start turning the ship slowly into some other systems. It gives us that flexibility, right? And we can do that across the board pretty rapidly. You change it once and you're done.
It really does. Go back to the prefab app. I mean, the first time the gentleman said, hey, I need an app. I'm getting phone calls each and every day. The application was 2 tables. It was pretty simple. It just tracked it. Okay, well, now what else does it need to do? And then you begin to augment and change what that core system did to match exactly. And it's amazing what that application had turned into, from just 2 tables and phone calls coming down to the prefab shop to now it went from like a 10,000 square foot facility to over 100,000 square foot prefab facility. You got to communicate. You have to. What if a date change comes up? How do you communicate to the PM, the foreman, the logistics who needs to ship out a prefab unit? All these different pieces need to play together. And there's a chance that maybe your system to date might not handle all that. So we need to think through that. We need to add in more of these notifications and make that process more robust.
And it's getting to the point too now where even beyond an app, you can go beyond that to really get the people that don't want to adopt technology. Like almost everybody now is used to texting. So it's like you can even have these apps up where it's like we built one not too long ago that was just trying to get where a specific task was at in the field. So it'd go out and it would like text the user even if they had a flip phone, they wouldn't even have to enter an app. It'd be like, in today, like, what's your status on this task already lined out for them? And they could reply. We all get those like reply yes or no. It was like for them, it was like, complete or substantially complete, right? So you can really start to tailor stuff to meet users where they're at with technology, because there is a big gap, you know what I mean, on every job site and people's willingness to adopt.
I've been seeing more and more of that type of solution popping up recently.
Yep.
Like there are a couple of them that I've even talked with some of the founders of, and really exciting to see some of these AI applications coming out that can text a user in the field, say, hey, where's this at? Or even the user can text it and say, I don't have this information. And it can scan Procore and email. It can scan Bluebeam, like all of this stuff, pull that data back, send them the relevant PDFs and say, yeah, here you go. And then also this email was sent the other day. I heard it quoted on one, it was a high-rise building. I can't specify where because I'm not sure, but it was on one high-rise building, 3.6 million pieces or documents were generated.
Just for that one
project.
Building.
3.5, 3.6, something like that. Wild. But like you think of like, oh crap, I got to dig through all of that. If your organization structure is just a little bit off, like folder file management is just a little bit off, or you forgot to copy somebody on a thing. Oh my gosh, it's lost forever. Or that person got fired, God forbid. Like so many different little bits and bobs. And this is like, let's fire this out there, pull all that information down and distribute that out to the people that need to know. But even back to like having that connective tissue, that's still another separate thing that would need to be connected back to more of like a master brain of sorts.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so being able to just say, here's where it's at. And then that pushes it back to QuickBase, which pushes it back to P6. Like that sort of stuff is exciting to think about. And it's kind of the sky's the limit. It makes the the brain kind of spin
a little bit.
Which I don't know. I love that we're having these conversations. That's the type of stuff I'm like, I love this time saving aspect of things. And like that was such a big headache for us as detailers, like, oh, where's that? Where'd that go? I wish I could have just said, where's this thing? And then AI just goes, here you go. And it's like, holy cow, it saved us hours and hours and hours over the years. Days even.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like what I'm hearing in the conversation, I think a lot of things also can come back around to like, how are we training? So when we think about like the teams that we're putting on the job site, how are we training the field foreman who knows our systems, who are the journeymen? How are we training our project managers? And like, I'm almost wondering like, what can we do to kind of help make like QuickBase part of the training curriculum as we start to kind of move this forward, right? If you can get on the job site, you're handed all these templates. Here you go. Here's the templates. Here's the systems. Here you go. But we also want to encourage the project managers to think out in the field and be creative. That's where I see most of the excitement in construction. Well, labor shortage, we're trying to get all these people. Well, let's create these systems out in the field. You don't need to know how to integrate right out of the gate. There's a team here. We can help you out. There's always services. But that person who's out in the trenches, who's at that job trailer, I think if we can train up all of these people as they get on the job site, it opens up this whole nother trade that you were talking about earlier and treat it like a separate tool within their tool belt. Let's look at the training and how we're putting people on site. What are we arming them with as we continue?
I can think of one self-serving way that could be done, but I'll step back from the mic. Video. What? Anyway, like this is really fun. Like, I want to continue to push into like, what other things have you guys created though? Like, what other systems have you guys created that you're like, wow, that was one small little step, but it caused a ripple effect of like, it saved them days, weeks, months, years on a schedule?
Yeah, I mean, one, I don't know if it's a save in days, but it's definitely a save in money one is, it was one of those kind of scheduling projects I was talking about earlier, but they realize now that they know everybody was finally on the same page of exactly who's doing what on a job site on each given day. They could use that, and we built an app for them that was basically pre-task safety planning, right? They could pull in all the tasks, put it right in the face of a foreman, right, for a subcontractor. And they could go through, and we were able to like specifically tailor to what kind of tasks they're doing, like what recognitions or acknowledgments of safety that they were going to do. So if they're operating a crane that day, it's like, you guys are saying that whoever's going to be running it has the correct certs. You're not going to do these things, this, and this, and would actually get sign off from the subcontractor, from the foreman, like on the app itself. So what it did for the job site is one, the cynical part of me is it's a big CYA, right? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For the general contractor. But it also created more of a safety culture on the job site with all the foremans, because everybody knew what everybody was doing every day, and everybody knew. It was just kind of like a mindfulness type reminder in the morning and a sign off that like, these are really things that we have to practice. And the job sites that ended up using it was about 8 for this general contractor, saw massive adoption even from subcontractors who were like, we don't want to do any software. Like, usually you don't want accountability, right? And this actually was accountability that they wanted, was a reminder. And the safety incidences, I don't have the percentage right off the top of my head, but to my understanding went like way, way down because people are just on top of their stuff and aligned. So that's one that we did fairly recently that I was really excited about.
A safer project, who wouldn't want that?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
But like you as a subcontractor, like sometimes accountability can be scary if not presented in the right sort of way and fairly. So I just think it was a really well-built app, really well thought out with this general contractor, and really took all of those aspects into case, and like they actually liked using it.
Yeah.
So
how often are you seeing apps that are built job specific? Like, because I feel like the easy thing to go to is like building out a full process for a GC or something like that. I feel like mega projects, if we're going back to that, like, are you seeing a lot of just like one-off sort of systems that need to be built just for one specific project and one specific scenario?
I see two things. I see for smaller, like general contractors, is typically like one system, and they may have spin-off apps. A lot of the stuff that we do for the really, really large GCs out there, they tend to be kind of like a bunch of like, we call them clusters. I don't know if that's the official name, but you have a bunch of like cluster apps. It may be a project management app. It may be a safety app. It may be something else, tracking certifications. But they're really specific to projects because all these projects are in different locations. The needs are different. They're very custom projects, which is why you need custom software. But then they're kind of like all syncing back up to like a mothership app. You know what I mean? That's really kind of taking what's similar about them and putting it together so it can be reported on and more integrated with the monolithic systems. So that's what we see and end up doing a lot for very large GCs, right?
Have you trademarked a mothership app? Because I think you should. That's really sick.
Yes. As of today.
As of today. TM.
Yes.
That's all you gotta say.
That's all you gotta say. TM.
I think the change manager, I think that's actually pretty interesting because you're right. I mean, depending on where they're at on like their maturity curve, I guess, I mean, they might just need an app for a project. And and what we see is they begin to dump in a whole bunch of like RFI, submittal logs, and then it starts going into tool tracking, inventory tracking, fleet tracking. And then the natural thing is hindsight's always 2020. Typically the question comes is, man, small projects need tools too. Small projects have fleet and vans and we got to go through with it. And then we start asking ourselves questions like, maybe we should take a step back and think about this holistically and think about what that realm needs to begin to shift into. Sometimes we find the software that is just ordering the tools, but there's ordering the tools, it's understanding the inventory, it's about preventative maintenance, and we start thinking back like it has to funnel back to something bigger and the other processes that begin to impact it, et cetera. So it begins to morph. To answer a little bit of your question, like what's impacting schedule, I think I'm going to keep talking about labor shortages and stuff here. Like, so one of the apps that ancillary hit home was workforce management, manpower tracking. How do you request people is a whole process in and of itself, especially in union versus non-union. And how does that come through? Who's calling the hall? How do you begin to manage that when you have many project executives across the regions, many manpower controllers, whatever you want to call that at your firms? And then how do you begin to identify the certifications for people and put people with the right skill sets at the right jobs overall and place them? Of maybe you want person X who doesn't want to travel. How are you documenting that? And a lot of times it's in a spreadsheet, and then you're tracking per diems in a spreadsheet and travel pay and everything else. We begin to kind of figure out if we can get people to the job site quicker in the right places, it's going to have an impact on the schedule and actually with how we get people. And then it just continues to go on and on. I can actually tell stories of how that goes into HR, payroll. How do you get them set up into the system? How do you get safety on site to do orientation and some of the notifications? So it gets exciting to see this begin to kind of roll out, and the value proposition, going back to that story, that actually has an impact because it's like, this is how we do things here at our business. Great, let's match that. Let's see how we begin to create those systems together.
This idea of payroll and contractors and stuff is kind of hitting a little bit near and dear to my heart because that's a lot of what I have to deal with of like, yeah, I'm not going to keep an audio person on for a year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't have that many shoots to keep them busy every single day. So why would I justify it? Which is the case for construction constantly.
Yeah.
That's why we have subcontractors or specialties. And so bringing in and tracking the overall budget on projects, is that some stuff that you guys are seeing too? Of like, all right, yeah, we're managing all of these subs. We're pushing this back up to a master kind of, not spreadsheet, but a master dashboard to see kind of where we're at on the project. Is that something you guys have done?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm curious on what you've seen as well, but just to start off, I mean, let's go talk about like, how are we tracking the budget, schedule values, cost codes, and how are we kind of needing to roll this up so that the owners, the GCs are seeing this, and how are we kind of aligning that and seeing that through? So I think a lot of times when we get that export and we begin to understand, okay, how do we need to put money and dollars and labor to these areas to kind of roll up to the budget? And then how do you need that information? Because sometimes they want earned value management and these special financial terms that how are we going to track this job overall? So you need to make sure that your systems are putting that in place all the way through and begin pushing it up. So yeah, a couple of dashboards we would create for the CFOs and others. I mean, the project executives would go into their jobs and see their portfolio of jobs a lot of times to see across. And that begins to get exciting to see, where do I need to spend my time as a day? I want to sit down at my computer in the morning and have a cockpit. So I know where to put the most of my time to. Maybe this job is behind budget and we begin to drill into it overall. Teams are getting bigger and more complex and we need to get them out there quicker.
Yeah,
you seeing anything?
Oh, tons of that. And you mentioned earned value management, which is kind of like near and dear to my heart because it seems so complex, because in order to do earned value management, you've got to, first of all, do some level of budgeting. You got to have some aspect of bidding in there. You have to understand the schedule. You have to have that all put in. You have to know on the job site what's happening in the field. And that's where like these low code solutions, like we've been talking about, we find ourselves building that all the time. We're like starting with just getting somebody to schedule the way that they want to work. And then we're moving into budget, and then we're attaching that to costs. And then we're putting that out in the field so we can get stuff back from the laborers. And then we're putting in bidding things into the app where it's like we can go out and push something out for different subcontractors to bid on certain type of work and select. And you can really, like, we're getting to a place where all of that can be really built to like how an individual business operates, but then like interconnected together. And it's almost like when the first time you see these things, it's like almost mind blowing. You're like, oh my God, like we can know all of this and it can be at our fingertips. It's like the kind of thing that gets me excited, because I think we've just really gotten used to just like, that's really too hard, or somebody in the back office has a spreadsheet that handles that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, this can like data for the people, right? Like this could be data that's actually useful in the field with the people that matter. So
It really is true, because the project managers, I mean, I think of a customer that we build out like an invoice management process for, and how do you track pay apps? And going back to large and small projects, I mean, sometimes it's going to be different on how we invoice. Are we billing off AIA, schedule of values? What does this begin to look like? And to your point, it's like the eureka moment hits them, and it's like the CEO, the president has always wanted to say, I just want to go to my jobs, do 3 clicks, see where I'm at overall with the status, the budget, see where it's at. Yeah. And it's beautiful when it all starts to come together, because it starts off with one app, one use case. And then I've seen instances where they're actually seeing it all under one roof, and it begins to change the game. And project managers or foremen who start off and saying, what the heck, this isn't going to do anything overall, begin to change their tune of saying, okay, I'm starting to see we're actually being more efficient with the jobs. We're bidding more efficiently because we have an app that tells us how to bid.
Yeah.
So we're choosing the right work right out of the gate, a little bit better as a team and clarity, and it begins to get exciting across the board.
What about like forecasting? So like producing almost like a financial model of sorts of like, all right, here's what I think it's going to cost, that sort of thing. Are you able to kind of push that in there and play with it?
Yeah, and it's usually tied to like, especially in the earned value management, there's a lot of ways to do it too, depending on a lot of factors. But it's like, if you have a good schedule in there that's really being adopted in the field, you can forecast out pretty much all the costs of your entire projects.
Interesting.
Right?
I've seen it where PMs and foremen had to choose 2 different projections to see what the percentage difference would be. And then they would have a discussion about that at the end too.
Oh, yeah.
So going back to how do you do forecasting and projections?
Yep.
And it gets kind of exciting in that sense to say, okay, let's hold each other accountable.
So the way, and I'll throw up my hand and say, hey, Google Sheet user here. But a lot of times we'll do a project and that gets pushed. And I'm probably like very similar to a lot of the ways that contractors would run their stuff is we'll do a project. We have a spreadsheet for that tracks all of our expenses, everything that goes into it, travel, per diem, all these different things. And that lives in Drive in a folder.
Yep.
And in order to get at it, I have to go click, 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 click. And then I open one up and I'm looking at that. And then I got to go click, 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 click. And I got to find the other one and pull it back up. Now, theoretically, yes. Could I link those back to a master spreadsheet? Yes. But it would be great if I could also have the data for all time.
Right, the history.
That I can pull from and say, oh, wow, there's been a lot of inflation lately. Or like material prices have gone up like crazy, or like, hey, this camera package is now crazy expensive. I know I'm speaking from that sense, but like it's very similar to construction in that way.
Yeah.
So it's hilarious. Hey, Christian, I need a license at QuickBase.
I was going to say, we should talk after this.
We need to talk after this, because this was literally a problem that I was working on this morning. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way than this. And I'm like sitting in my Google Sheet trying to forecast stuff. Anyway, that's surprising. Apparently video agencies need QuickBase too. So.
Each and every one. It's spectacular to see all the different use cases, because our minds start to go to all the different KPIs and metrics.
Right.
That we should be learning and gleaning. Now, careful with that, because it can go the other way. You can have analysis process. How many of us have seen a spreadsheet that has every single item that you can possibly imagine on the one tab?
Yeah.
And it's just absolutely a killer.
Yeah.
Let's put the right stuff on the right dashboards so that the foreman, when they sign in, they see what they need. When payroll comes in, they see exactly what they see, et cetera. And that was the beautiful moment of saying, okay, let's use the same system, but let's tailor these dashboards so that we're not inundated with too much information.
Yeah, right.
At the same time, because that could be the other edge of the sword.
So many numbers. so many numbers. It can get crazy real fast.
Yeah.
Real
I'm
fast.
thinking about the history. One app we built was like a labor tracker, rates wise. So that when you're bidding work, you want to think ahead. Okay, is this a 3-year job, 5-year job? What's going to be the rates at that point? And are we making sure that we're actually going to be profitable? Well, how would you project that if you didn't have the historical information of moving forward? You might just kind of calculate and throw a number in the air and have a percentage increase. Okay, that could work. But what about by each trade, by each journeyman, apprentice, each period, et cetera? So that was actually a very handy app. That what we saw.
Yeah.
It can be, we're seeing it like at VeilSun, we're seeing a lot of conceptual estimating apps, you know, that are really like taking in past history of other projects, a bunch of other factors, right? History with different subcontractors and who might do the project to help better estimate projects up front.
Yeah.
Right. And it takes a lot of data to do that, but it's not as hard as it used to be. You don't have to get in line with IT and wait until longer than the project is done, right? For 6 years. So
Yeah.
And a lot of that AI is going to help too in the future too.
Yeah. Build me this thing.
Yeah.
That's the exciting part. It's ChatGPT's been getting better and better at doing some of that stuff. I asked it to build me a spreadsheet today.
That's right.
Nice.
QuickBase can do the same thing.
Well, okay,
so we can
there
ask
you go.
AI to say, build that app that you need overall.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Yeah, we'll give it a shot. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
All right, so we've come to a good spot for our megaphone. I think now's the time. So if we gave you both a megaphone and around 60 seconds to speak to the construction industry, what would you want to say? Bob, we'll start with you.
Megaphone out.
Yeah.
Basically, what I would come up with right now is don't settle for the status quo, right? Change is happening. Get excited about the change. And also respect the people who's been doing this job for quite some time. There's a lot of good ideas out there, and we need to make sure that we get all the ideas from all generations, because together we're going to create something pretty fascinating in the next few years overall. So let's get excited. Let's get all the ideas, and respect is number one overall. And let's embrace this change that we're about to see.
Awesome.
Moving forward.
James, what you got, man?
That was actually mine too. Is like, so I think it's all about embracing change. I think it's not getting stuck in old ideas. Like, it's a very old industry, and this is how it's always been done.
Yeah.
And all of that, and respecting the wisdom of that, but then also being able to kind of think beyond it, think outside of the box. Problems that seemed impossible and maybe probably were 10 years ago are actually, you're much closer to that solution technology-wise than ever, than you might think. So, you know, be curious, ask questions, like, don't accept the status quo, and just, you know, get excited about it. Because the construction industry, to me, like, I chose this as something to be in technology and not VC stuff, not go out and develop this like product, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a very exciting industry. It's the most complex projects in the entire world.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's building the world. So we just got to get the technology caught up to that.
Bob and James, thanks for joining us, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Heck yeah.
Appreciate it.